The first question this evening is for you, Mr. Becker, and that is, Michigan currently spends more money on prisoners than on higher education. Do you believe that Michigan should reduce its incarceration rate? And if so, do you as the chief prosecutor have a role to play in reducing the incarceration rate?
Is this on? There we go. Okay, good. I'd like to thank you for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to speak at a forum like this. I think it's very important for us to get out there. To your question, yes, I think quite clearly as a prosecutor, I do have a role in reducing the prison commitment rate, and that's something we are committed to. We're committed to doing it, though, rationally and not just releasing prisoners for the sake of releasing prisoners. We want to keep public safety in mind. And I don't know if people are familiar with it, but quite frankly, we have been reducing the prison rate in the state of Michigan. If you look over, I think it's since 2006, we've had 15% less prisoners committed to the Michigan Department of Corrections. We've cut the prison employee rate by 20%. Unfortunately, the level of spending, the Michigan Department of Corrections budget has remained flat. A lot of that's because of administrative costs and healthcare costs. So we have been, if you look at what we are, we're about 41,000. I think right around 10 years ago, we're at a little over 51,000. So the trend is going down, and I fully support that, but we also don't want to just release prisoners and let dangerous individuals out there. When you look at our prison commitment rates, 22% of felons go to prison in the state of Michigan. That's better than the national average. About 40% is the national average for prison commitment rates. So we're doing better than much of the rest of the state. Other numbers, if you like them. One, if your initial felony sentence, 1 in every 10 go to prison right off the bat. So those are fairly low numbers. Now, can we work to reduce them? Yeah, I think there's some things Senator Pruz, and you could probably talk to that, and his proposals right now in front of the legislature are trying to reduce the recidivism rates, whether it be probationers or parolees. Those are around 25% ballpark for each. If we can reduce those rates from going back into prison, I think that's going to have a substantial impact on keeping that prison rate down. So we are committed. Prosecuting attorneys, myself, Prosecuting Attorneys Association are committed in doing that, but we're just not just to release prisoners to release prisoners. We want to make it safe. We might want to make sure we keep an eye on who we're releasing and not just releasing people to look at the budget, because that's not right.
Well, should we change our prison system or change our incarceration system to where violent offenders are the people we send to prison and not people for like check forgery and that type of thing?
We've already got that. 73% in Michigan, this is Michigan Department of Corrections statistics, so about 73% of the people in Michigan prisons are violent offenders. Okay, CSC, rape, robbery, carjacking. We're well above. If you look at the federal statistics, federal prisons are about 50% are drug offenders. Michigan only has about 8% are drug offenders. Nonviolent offenders are very low as well. 73% are violent offenders in the state of Michigan. That was a decision by the legislature, and that's something obviously as a Prosecutors Attorneys Association we are fully committed to. So that there is kind of a misnomer that we're sending a bunch of drug offenders and nonviolent offenders to prison. That's not happening. It's the violent offenders are really going to prison in the state of Michigan. Now, if you want to talk a federal system, that's a whole different ballgame. But Michigan Department of Corrections, I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Okay. Chief Rahinsky, the same question. Since we spend so much money on prisons, more money on prisons than higher education, do you believe that you play a role, and your department plays a role in reducing the incarceration rate?
So to the prosecutor's point, I think he really answered that question very well. When you look at incarceration rates, as a community, as a state, as a police department, would we like to see lower rates? And the answer is certainly, but we've got an obligation to enforce the laws as written. But we also have some discretion, and that's utilized every day. And then working closely with the city prosecutor and the county prosecutor, diversionary programs have been very successful here in Grand Rapids. We've created a recidivism program called CLEAR that has enjoyed great success in reducing the recidivism rate of people who are released back into the Grand Rapids community. And we've started the first female recidivism program in the state by duplicating what we've been doing with CLEAR, which was geared just towards male releasees, and we now have that same program for female releasees. So yes, we want to see a reduction in terms of the incarceration rate. I'd love to see those dollars that are currently being expended to house inmates go to other social services, and I think our focus on recidivism rates and keeping people from reoffending is a step in that direction.
On a related question, Chief, while you have the mic, your department has the discretion to issue an appearance ticket rather than to arrest individuals. Is that correct?
For numerous offenses, yes.
Is that policy, or is it at the discretion of the officer?
It's at the discretion of the officer. We've had some conversations about whether we would want to actually make that a policy. But I'm not comfortable taking the discretion out of the officer's hands, because there's so many intangibles in each police-citizen contact. For us to try to capture all of those intangibles and tie the officer's hand when they're making a decision whether a citation for a mandatory court appearance or a physical arrest is most appropriate. So we trust our officers, we hire well, we train well, we supervise well, so that discretion, I think, is an important role.
But isn't it a problem, Chief, when you have officers who abuse the discretion, and you have statistics from your own study that shows that there is a discriminatory process or from the police department itself as to who is focused on, who is not focused on. So basically, if you're arrested in the right part of town, you get an appearance ticket. If you're arrested in the wrong part of town, you get hauled off to jail.
So the study that I think you're alluding to didn't address appearance tickets. It addressed our traffic. It was a traffic stop study, and what it showed is a disparity between the rate of stops for African American and minority drivers versus the rate of stops for Caucasian drivers. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of the citations we write are equipment violations. It's an easy citation. It's a citation that really is easy to identify. So officers tend to write a lot of those. There's a strong socioeconomic tie to those types of equipment violations. And unfortunately, poverty in Grand Rapids tends to be centralized in certain neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods tend to have large minority populations. So I think the study is not as easily looked at and say that there's a causation based on just the officer's activities. That being said, we've been taking great steps since that study came out. So we created an anti-bias or bias-free policing policy with the help of Dr. Lori Friedel from the University of South Florida that every officer in the department has been trained to. We also brought back in the consultant who actually did the study, who trained every officer in the police department. And today we started our first session of policing at the speed of trust. So that's a system that Franklin Covey teaches, where we pair up individual officers with community members. So it's based on contact theory, that to build trust and relationships and rapport, you've got to spend time with an individual. So to your point, sir, we took that study to heart, and we recognized that we had work to do in terms of building trust and ensuring equitable outcomes for everyone in our community, and that's something that we continue to work on.
Chief, I appreciate the efforts that you're making, but the perception on the street is that nothing's changed. That if you are in the wrong community and of the wrong race, you get hauled off to jail for things like trespassing, for disorderly, for littering, for open intox, for consuming alcohol in public, for excessive noise. Excessive noise, which is a civil infraction, correct? Many times lead to officers removing individuals from the vehicle and then searching the individuals and searching the vehicle when it's a civil infraction. It's not even a misdemeanor, correct?
So the feedback that I get from our community, and granted, I don't want to soft pedal the fact that there's challenges between law enforcement and the community, and that's not just a Grand Rapids phenomenon. It's a national issue. It's historic, it's systemic, and it's something we've been working on for a long time, and we still have a lot of work to do. That being said, what I'm hearing from our community is they appreciate the steps that we're taking as a department and the steps that we're taking together as a community. And in an effort to try to measure that and monitor that, we just brought in another organization called Elucid. And Elucid is currently conducting surveys in New York City with the New York City Police Department, the largest in the country, where they can measure public sentiment towards the police department. So we met with them yesterday. We spent the better part of the day with them, and they'll be able to measure public sentiment broken down to the block level. So we'll be able to tell where we're being well received, where we need to put out additional community initiatives, where we need to get out of the cars more, walk neighborhoods, be in parks. So if it's important to us, we want to be able to measure it. And Elucid, in that relationship we just entered into, will give us that opportunity.